we have ourselves a few teams that have clinched their way into the Stanley Cup Playoffs in 2023. There are a whole bunch of clinching scenarios for playoff spots, top 3 spots in their divisions, and in some cases, President's Trophies too. But with yesterday's events, we had ourselves the first official matchup confirmed in this year's postseason dance. It's one that nobody's really surprised to see, especially considering how this division has played out over the past few months, but just having it set in stone, being what it is, it's now all of a sudden confirmed, and we have ourselves a whole bunch of discussion we can have because of that fact. Let's head over to the Atlantic Division and talk about the second and third place matchup that is going to be taking place in the first round of this year's postseason dance. Toronto versus Tampa. A rematch of last year, a series where a lot of people felt the Toronto Maple Leafs probably should have deserved a better fate. Now, I am kind of in that boat as well. I remember covering the series last year here on the YouTube channel, and I watched all the games. I did. I had everything going on in the background while I was editing, just watching what Jack Campbell was able to do, what Vasilevsky was able to do, for how talented both of these goaltenders were in their 2021-2022s. That playoff series was just kind of the death of all their numbers because they both posted up some pretty bad save percentages if you take a look at what's expected out of them. However, even though the save percentages weren't all too great, they still played well enough that the series went to 7 games, it was super tight, and then you had yourselves Nick Paul in Game 7 score 2 times as the Lightning won and eventually advanced to the second round. You could clown on the Maple Leafs for all their losses and all their choked leads, Boston, and then did I mention Boston? And Washington was in there too, Columbus, Montreal. They choke a lot. But this Tampa series from last year really was a good one, and it's just unfortunate that it comes at the end of a string of losses because the Maple Leafs have been clowned on for all this time for getting those losses in the books. This Tampa series, though, was competitive. The Maple Leafs, in my opinion, honestly had a really good chance to win. It was just the odd series where one team wins and one team loses. And Toronto, unfortunately, was on the wrong side of that coin flip. So, heading into this year's Tampa versus Toronto matchup, it was always kind of expected this would be the case. Here's a tweet made by Jeff Fayette from yesterday. Toronto and Tampa have been matched up with each other as projected playoff opponents every day since November 27th. That's 126 days, 52 Leafs games, 57 Lightning games without any change in projected opponent, plus 7 Toronto and 5 more Tampa Bay games to go. 75% of the season has been played with these two guys projecting to match up against each other. Guys? Why did I say guys? Teams, excuse me. Vayette then talks about how this is his gripe with the division format and everything, which is a very fair point to bring up. But the fact is, this is what we have, this is what we are expecting to having. Let's go over to each of these teams and see how they stack up against each other in the NHL standings. Now, right now, if you take a look at that Atlantic Division, Boston is number 1. No questions asked. They have clinched the President's Trophy, they are the best team this year, and that's not going to change, no matter who they play in the first round. But because Boston has been so freaking good this year, Toronto, currently 2nd seed, and Tampa Bay, currently 3rd seed, were pretty much going to play off against each other since November. Toronto and Tampa both share 45 wins on the season. However, Toronto has done it in 2 fewer games played. Toronto also has 20 regulation losses. Tampa Bay has 26. Toronto Maple Leafs also have more overtime points than Tampa does. Take a look at the goals for and against. Tampa actually edges out Toronto in goals for. They've got 11 more, 267 versus the Leafs 256. Tampa also has more goals against at 231 versus Toronto's 206. So the goal differential actually does lie in the Maple Leafs' favor. If you want to talk about individual points, okay, well, the Toronto Maple Leafs have one 95-point guy in Mitch Marner, one 82-point guy in William Nylander, and 2 70-point guys. Austin Matthews has 78 points in 68 games played, 37 goals too, so unfortunately not the 60 goals in 72 games that he had last year. And you also have John Tavares, who's got 75 points in 74 games played too. All these guys are over a point per game, and it's a pretty good top 4. Meanwhile, on Tampa, instead of having a top 4 that is absolutely stacked, you have a top 3. Steven Stamkos, Brayden Point, and Nikita Kucherov. Kucherov has 106 points already. He's third in the NHL in points behind Draisaitl and McDavid. Point is at 89 points in 77 games, and Stamkos is at 80 points. Stamkos is actually getting heavily outscored by Brayden Point in terms of the goals, which is really interesting to see. But even though the edge in point-per-game players is given over to Toronto, Tampa shines with their depth. 4th overall in points, you have Hagel, tied with Alex Killorn. They both have 59 points in 77 games played. Mikhail Sergachev also has 59 points in 75 games played. And then you have Victor Hedman, who's actually had a pretty down year at 45 points in 72 games this season. Nick Paul, Ross Colton, and Anthony Cirelli round out the top 10, as they each have 32, 30, and 27 points. Corey Perry also has 25 points, so he's right out there on that 11th overall spot. And if you go over to Toronto, their top 10 scores sort of drop off in terms of the point production, as you have Morgan Rielly with a down year, 39 points. Michael Bunting only has 47 this year. Calle Jarnkrok, Kerfoot, Kampf, and Giordano round out that top 10. So the Toronto Maple Leafs unfortunately don't have the production coming from their depth as the Tampa Bay Lightning do. Toronto does have more point-per-game guys, however Tampa's top guys are outproducing the top highest guys on Toronto. It's a very even matchup if you wanted to just go point production only, so if we wanted to go and extend our look onto what we could see, this article on NHL.com kind of goes out there and talks about that. The Maple Leafs have played the Lightning in the first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. This is what Sheldon Keefe said about the matchup. The preparation, for the most part, goes on behind the scenes. Obviously, we played them in the playoffs last season, and we're monitoring them throughout this season. There's not a whole lot of difference there in terms of what you're going to prepare for. It's more just focusing on our game. And when we focus on our game, of course, that allows us to prepare for the remaining regular season games at the same time. Alex Killorn said this: "It seems like we're kind of finding our game too. To get into the playoffs is great, and everything is kind of known with who we're playing. But we want to continue to play the same way because it's going to be so important when we start the playoffs." Then we have ourselves the breakdown of points. The teams have split 2 games this season, with Tampa winning 4-3 in overtime on December 3rd at home, and Toronto winning on December 20th at their home arena. They will play April 11th in Toronto, the second-to-last regular season game for each. Marner and Nylander each have 3 points, 2 goals, 1 assist against the Lightning this season, and Austin Matthews and Michael Bunting each have 2 points, 1 goal, 1 assist. Matt Murray is 1-0-1 with a 2.50 goals against the Lightning, having allowed 5 goals on 52 shots. Stamkos, Cirelli, and Corey Perry each have 2 assists against the Maple Leafs this season, and Ross Colton, Killorn, and Nikita Kucherov each scored 1 goal. Vasilevsky is 1-1-0 with a 2.51 goals against Toronto, having allowed 5 goals on 77 shots. And so really, when it comes to the head-to-head matchup, just the analysis done here on the website or on the article makes it seem pretty equal. You then have a breakdown as to how the teams have traversed the offseason. Toronto got Ryan O'Reilly, Ashari, Lafferty, Luke Schenn, Gustafsson, and McCabe, so, I mean, when you read it out like that, this is a pretty stacked team. But Tampa Bay got themselves Tanner Jeannot, and unfortunately, it hasn't really worked out for him so far, but at the same time, they're hopefully going to try to get more out of him as the postseason comes along. Either way, though, Toronto versus Tampa is going to be our first confirmed Stanley Cup matchup in 2023. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as to how things are going to go. Who do you think is going to win? If you had to place an early bet on the money line, I guess, who do you think has the W and in how many games played? For me, I'm thinking this is going to go to 7. Obviously, things can change from now until the start of the playoffs. Maybe, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but maybe some superstar player on one of the teams gets injured. I don't really know. Things can change as time goes on, but for right now, this is going to be a crazy good series. This is going to be a tight series. I cannot wait to see how Matt Murray fares against Andrei Vasilevsky, 2 Stanley Cup winning goaltenders facing off against each other. Then you have 2 of the top stars in the world, Marner, Kucherov, Adam Matthews, Nylander, and Brayden Point there too. Rielly versus Hedman, 2 superstar defensemen who are having bad years. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this entire matchup. I hope you enjoyed this. Juraj, and bye.